started, as that would gracefully permit those to leave that aren't into jazz. Thank you for staying the wee hours. We will not cut the concert short unless you fall asleep. We have a certain number of numbers that we want to do, both on euphonium and tuba. And we're also going to feature Ned Wilkinson and what's the other guy's name? Joe Ballard on one number. So we do appreciate you staying with us. And we intend to, well, how can I put it? I feel this is just as serious, but sometimes we get a little bit looser on stage than you're allowed to when you're playing music that is being read. We're going to start out by playing a number that I just did an album that last summer in Sweden with Red Mitchell, and a very, very close friend of mine had passed away, and I found out about it the day before the album. I was kind of tore up about it, and his name is Freddie Crane, a piano player, exceptional piano player, and so Red said, well, why don't we dedicate most of the music to Freddie? This is a tune that Freddie loved, and it's a good tune for musicians because it kind of, the title is a good attitude. There is no greater love. Tuba Euphonium Conference, except the first one in Indiana. At that time, he didn't know what a tuba was. Being from western Oklahoma, he thought you plowed with them. On drums, we have Mr. Dan Robbins of Dallas, Texas. On bass, we have Mr. Jamie Holbrook from Dallas, Texas. Back on piano, of course, we have Mr. Steve Harlos. A two-gun man, being that he plays very fine classical piano and a very fine accompanist, and then he also plays very fine jazz. And we haven't played the whole world all over yet, have we, Steve? But played a few places together. This next tune was written by the great Duke Ellington. I love the music of Duke, and I often play a lot of his music. I think that the world is a very, very much richer because of Mr. Duke Ellington. I don't know a professional musician who hasn't at least made some of his earnings by playing the music of the great Duke. So here is Take the A Train. Isn't music fun? It's a real kick to be playing for you, and also it's a kick to, I always enjoy working with Jack and Steve. And once in a while I get to perform in concert with some of my students or former students. And it's a pleasure for me tonight to be working with Dan on the drums and Jamie on bass. They've been excellent students. It's one of these things I'm excited about going to Florida, but these are two guys that I'll miss very much. They're good players, they're good people, and they're fun to be with. So I'm grateful that they're here working with us. Now let's see, we've done a thing by Duke Ellington, and the first tune we did, No Greater Love, that was by Isham Jones, right? Okay. We're going to do a tune now by Tchaikovsky. Dale, you didn't laugh when the other... Yeah, we decided that we would do something by Tchaikovsky to try to raise the level a little bit. So we were talking to his daughter last week. She lives in Tulsa. We're trying to pick a good tune, and she said, you know, if Chai had had his choice, he would have written this tune as a bossa nova, but he died before bossa novas were invented, so. But she kind of dug the idea, and so Jack wrote this thing out. So we're going to do Swan Lake as a bossa nova. And we hope we don't drown on the changes. Let me see that lead sheet. One, two, bop it, two, three. Can't you just see that swan? Play the swan. That's a bag swan. Play it. know some of you purchased some records that Jack and I have done when we had them here this week. We have some more. We ran out of some of them, but we did bring some this evening. So after the concert, if you're interested in any of our records, well, you might contact us. And if you are interested in our records, you should see us tonight because they are not that easy to find. We are recording for the Oblivion label, and it's a little bit difficult to find them. And we are going to do another album this next year, and we may put that one on. That's an awful nice thing to play as a bossa nova. This next tune has always been one of my favorites, and it's called Stella by Starlight. I love this horn, but you got to keep changing horn. We got to put a valve on this one. Yeah, you should. Thank you. So, I'm going to go back to Duke Ellington now and do another one of my favorite tunes by the Duke. We'd like to dedicate this number to two people. We're going to dedicate this number to Fernando Marcos of the Philippines and baby Doc Duvalier of Haiti. It's called Don't Get Around Much Anymore. We usually play I'll Be Glad When You're Dead, You Rascal. You're playing, but these come with 6 B flats. You don't believe it. You want to hear them, right? Six B flats. Now they want to hear 6 B flats. I don't. That's 4 of them. Director ever talk to you about alternate fingering? Take this. Matteson and Euphonium. Thank you very much. We'd now like to have Joe Dollard and Ned Wilkinson join us. They've selected a tune that they're going to play, and we're going to play it with them. But they're going to do an interesting thing. Both of these people are two-gun people. They both play euphonium, and they both play tuba. So they'll start out by playing the instruments that they played today in the competition, and then they'll switch instruments. And they're going to play a tune called Lady Bird. Right? Yeah, that's right. Okay, so let's hear it for these two gentlemen. Matt, Joe, and Bryant. Tune called Lazy Bird, but there's a tune that Miles did many years ago called Lady Bird. And since we're near the old LBJ ranch, we think. I'll fix it, fella. Just. Let me get up there. Let me measure this. Oh, that's gorgeous. Are you ready? What's that? One, two, 2. Euphonium and then tuba. Well, we have another treat for you tonight. Move the stand here, and we're going to play a horn that I think you'll find this.
Is Elizabeth Taylor here?
Yeah, right. Jack. Okay, let me go get this.
Well, he looked great with the push broom, too. You know?
This is a helicon tuba that I bought in Davenport, Iowa in about 1957, I guess it was. Before that. They told me it was made in about 1830. I doubt that, since the valves weren't invented, these type of valves, until about 1860 something. But anyway, it's an old horn. It looks like it, but I didn't buy it new. But I remember wearing this. This is the horn that I was wearing the day I walked into the concert in Milwaukee and asked Duke if I could sit in. Can you picture that? I guess there's a lot of people here who never checked into a motel, right? There you go. But this is a horn that I love very, very much because it did a lot of wonderful things for me. I spent a lot of years on the road playing this instrument, and this is the instrument that I recorded with Louis Armstrong. And so I can't think of it without thinking of some funny situations. Obviously, there's no case for this horn. I've never taken it to a tuba convention before because I always fly to them. And you can't get this on a plane. Although many years ago when I was traveling. I used to do some flying with the Dukes of Dixieland, and I used to carry this sucker on the plane. And quite often, the only place that they could put it on the plane where it would be damaged is they would actually put it in the cockpit with the pilot and the co-pilot. And lean it up against the door as they closed it. And it used to be, people look pretty weird, you know, when you get on the plane with one of these things. You're flying from Detroit or Chicago to Waxahachie, Texas or something. But there's a lot of fond memories of this horn. It was made for the U.S. Army, and it's called a Boston Wonder. There was a company in Boston that made the instruments. And if you ever find a Boston Wonder cornet, buy it. They're still a very good cornet. And they made this instrument, and the Army purchased them, and lots of times they used them for their mounted cavalry bands. And so you'd sit on the horse and play this thing, and this pointed forward. And they had problems with the people in the front part of the cavalry band hearing the tubas. So for a short time, they also made tubas in which the bell pointed backwards. They called them backshooters. And if you ever find one of them, buy it. It's very rare. The gentleman, I really don't know if he's still alive, but the gentleman that was playing tuba with the symphony in Portland back in the 60s, he had one of these, a Boston Wonder backshooter with a pointing back. He used to try to buy mine, I'd try to buy his, so we'd have a match set, you know. But those didn't work out because the front row would then be tubas with the bell pointing back, and the back row would be tubas with the bell pointing forward, and they couldn't hear each other, so they'd get apart, so it was a disaster. But this is an old Boston Wonder helicon, and it's made out of German silver. It's not made out of brass. The only brass in it is parts that I've had to replace that had gotten damaged. The metal is so soft, you can bend it very easily. The threads on the caps have stripped, so I had a plastic device made to hold it down. You can imitate a 36 Chevrolet with it. You know. But I love this horn. It did a lot of wonderful things for me. Jack and I are going to play a tune. I got to get the mic over here, and then we're going to play a tune called, what was it?
Limehouse.
Oh, Limehouse Blues. Why don't we switch around so I can see? You come this side. Well, so I don't clobber you. Well, I can't see it, but all right, we'll do it this way. Yeah, do it this way. some walking bass on this next one with Jamie. So we'll have Jamie and Steve and Dan join us, and we're going to do a tune called All the Things You Are. Thank you. Well, we're going to do 2 more tunes, and then we're going to take the chains off the door. This first one is the one that Jack and I do almost every time that we perform together, because it's been a very good tune for us to do. I have to stop and think a minute about which key, because I have a big band chart, which I do it in B flat and D flat, and then we have the tuba thing, which we do in E flat, and then we do it in G and A flat. So here we go with, and this is really my favorite ballad. And you can't go to any country in the world where they don't know this tune and love it. It's called Georgia on My Mind. nostalgia in my mind. The Hoagie sure left a lot of riches behind him for us to enjoy. Beautiful, beautiful songs. So did another gentleman by the name of Gershwin. We like to close out by, first of all, thanking you for staying this late hour with us. It's been a ball to play for you. It's been a ball to be here, part of the workshop, the symposium, and witness all the wonderful young players that are coming along. I heard 3 kids that are still in high school. It just knocked me out on their euphoniums the other day, and 3 on tubas. It's a marvelous thing. And I hope that get to play again for you sometime. And I hope you never forget that you're special, that you've been given a talent called music, and you're supposed to share that talent. Whether you make your living doing it, or whether you teach school, or you play professionally, or do both, or whether it's a hobby, it doesn't make any difference. You're supposed to share the talent that was given to you. We've been sharing this talent together this week. I hope you'll go home and play your instruments for everybody that you can find to play for. Broaden the interest in the tuba and the euphonium. I believe I can honestly say that people that don't or think they don't like the tuba or the euphonium just haven't heard what those 2 instruments can do. It wasn't too long ago that composers, as you know, didn't think that they could write anything melodic for the instruments, and of course that's not true. The instrument is not limiting, it's the brain that's limited. So enjoy your talent, share your talent. We'll close out by playing a tune that Gershwin wrote called Fascinating Rhythm. And until I see you again, I hope you have a wonderful year, a wonderful life, and God bless you all.
That's great.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1.
Steve Harlos on the piano, ladies and gentlemen. Jamie Holbrook on bass. Dan Robbins on the drums. My brother Jack Peterson on the guitar. And he wrote that last part. My name is Rick Matteson. Thank you so much. You want one more? It's late. Now we'll do it. We'll do, let me see. All right, since you've been so wonderful to us, we'll close out by doing a tune called Just Friends. And some of you know that years ago, the first album that Jack and I did, we did a tune I wrote called Hassles, which is a bebop line to the chord changes of Just Friends. We did that so that if it sold, we'd get the money, you know. It didn't sell. So, we got to rehearse with it. Let's see, we'll play Just Friends, and when do you want to do Hassles? In the middle something? Never. Never. Let me see. Okay.
When you hear it, you don't know why I called it hassle.
We'll do it as a shout chorus somewhere around after Steve's or something. Okay, here goes with Just Friends. Anybody know the lyrics to this tune? You do? I was going to invite you to sing along, you know. I'll tell you what would be hip. We'll play the tune and you guys call out the changes. How's that? Wouldn't that be hip to have a sing-along with Mitch? Remember Sing Along with Mitch Miller? Mitch Miller and the Sons of Mitches. You remember that show? Anyhow, I always thought that'd be very hip, man, to have a sing-along group, only instead of singing the lyrics, just sang the changes, you know. B flat major 7th, da da da, E flat 7 plus 11, F major 7th, da da da, A flat minor 7th, D flat 7, G minor 7, you know. I live in a town in Texas called Louisville that is so hip. Thank you. It is so hip that we have a radio station there that plays nothing but jazz, and all they play is Jamie Aebersold records. There's a hell of a lot of you here that never heard of Jamie Aebersold, man. All they are is rhythm section playing the changes to tunes so that you can practice. And little housewives walking around scat singing the tunes.
Here goes Just Friends.
That's good. Want an 8-bar intro? 1, sure. 2, why not? Why not? 1, 2, 3.
Thank you, friends. Till I see you again. Good night.
God bless.